Hi everyone, welcome to our very first community call for the year of 2021. Today we have three interesting sessions lined up. Before going into those main events, uh, let me share some details that would be helpful if you are new to these identity server community calls. Um, so in the description, you can see three links related to our community channels. So the very first link is pointing to our WSO2 IAM Twitter channel. There you can see uh, uh, events on the uh, identity server community, like our community call or the identity 15, etc. So if you are following this Twitter channels, you can keep up to date with such events. Um, so the second link on the description points to the WSO2 Slack channel. So there you can get involved more on the the IAM community. Um, Here you can see we have around 830 members join in this Slack community. So you can get involved with the discussion on the product development or the any clarifications you have on the uh, IS usage, or ask any questions about when you are using that in server, etc. So our engineers from the development team also actively interact with this particular Slack channel, so you can get expert opinion on any questions you have. So then comes to the third link where it's pointing to the our community called GitHub repository, where you can see the call notes on our previous community discussions. So if we take our previous session happened in the December, there you can see the topics that has been discussed over that community call. So if you are interested in any of these, you can follow this link and follow those topics. Um, and this contains some other important links as well. So if you take the first one, like it's pointing to the identity server product, so you can where you can download the latest product 5.11 or release, where which has been released in the last month, and give it a try, or you can follow the documentation, get to know about more about the features, or learn about the CIAM, etc. So one additional thing I would like to point is this particular repo, where it's contains all the blogs written by the identity server team. So if you take the our 2020 section, so you can see like there are a lot of blogs written on the identity server and the IAM as a general, or any interesting technologies that is relevant to this commit. So you can follow and see any interested topics you have. And so moving where you can see the for the 2021 as well. So we have some several articles that has been already written by the team as well. So moving to the today's topic. So let me go inside this one. So uh, we have uh, three sessions. Before going into the details, I start from this some interesting blogs that has been written from our last community call. So this first one is about the Moodle integration written by the Jenica. So Dinika first explaining why like a system like Moodle needs to be connected with the identity provider. So what are the advantages it gives as the as a like a admins of the system, as well as the users of the system, how their life becomes easy in managing or improve the experience of the user by providing the things like single sign-on, or not having to maintain multiple accounts, etc. And then she explains like the popular capabilities that being used in the identity server to integrate this kind of integrations in general, and then goes to the like the identity server OpenID Connect support that utilize the this she utilized in the latest steps to get this integration. So at high level, like Moodle supports the connecting to two providers or the identity providers, and so it also have some additional functionalities to like so this is all to support is provided by the Moodle itself. You don't have to install any other plugins or something like that, and can simply connect to an identity provider like identity server without that much of hassle. So basically, integration steps involving like a configuring identity service provider, like generating client ID and secrets, and adding some claims that requires by the Moodle, and that's with that it's done from the identity server side configuration. And when it comes to the Moodle, like it's she's step by step work through you on the like the what's need to be done, uh, like placing the client ID secrets that obtained by the identity server, and configuring the URLs of the identity server, and some additional things that need to be uh, uh, send like in the scope side, or the how to and enabling this particular configured identity like so to configuration of the model, and testing the full flow, and finish up by her article like showing like a small demo on the into the integration that once that is completely done. So, so once this simple like authentication overload like federated to the identity server, so there is endless capabilities that can be utilized on the identity server side, where like integrating multi-factors, or integrating with some other the IDPs, so etc. So she ended up with like pointing to such of those use cases, and like references on the uh, documentation and etc. to get those integration further things done. So moving on to the second topic. So as mentioned, like so the identity server 511 has been released in the December. So and if you go for refer our previous community call, where we have discussed the new group and role separation introduced with the identity server 511.0, and then this particular article by Anjana describes like he has written like a series of articles on the SCIM, and this is the latest one, uh, which so anybody like not familiar on the SCIM, that can go referring these basics of the SCIM protocol, which is being used for the managing user identity as a standard across the IAM domain. So and use cases, and the explaining what's in the details about SCIM. So in the 511 no release, like Anjana explains like how uh, extensibility of the SCIM API has been used for implementing this uh, uh, role endpoint. So this is a extended resource of the SCIM protocol. So it's a standard API, so you can do simple CRUD operations. But if you are familiar with SCIM, that will be much easier. So so it has given like example for every like operations, like create, update, delete, and search, etc. Um, so this will become handy like if you are already working with the SCIM API and managing used to manage users and groups within the identity server through the SCIM API, and if you are moving to the new identity server 511 or release, and wanted to do similar automation, don't do by any of your clients, can utilize this API. So moving on to our third article. So this is written by Anuradha uh, about like a very recent improvement done in the identity server product. So um, so as you like she starting with this article by explaining like so why we need different notification senders, what are the use cases that Identity Server uh, is using different notifications. So you can see uh, during the maybe user sign up, user might receive a notification sending okay, you are onboarded to the system and go update the password or recovery or scenarios likewise. So so she starting this article by explaining what are the notification usages of the identity server, and touching upon the different notification channels that identity server supports. So it's not only the email, you can have other notification channels such as like SMS. So and goes to the section where what exactly the problem that solves with this particular uh, topic. So what is the problem that user will have, like so in the multi-tenancy scenario she explains it using some like a example, and depending on the different tenants they might prefer to use different uh, notification sender. So maybe one might choose to uh, use one type of notification sender that provided by your default mail client or something like that. But other tenant would like to prefer to have some other notification sender that point to different. Let's say if it is a email, different SFTP server. So so in fact, like this particular capability has been there for Edit server in earlier version to some extent, but it's not as a first class support. So she explains the difference between the earlier way and like what's the uh, new way uh, configuring this one. So basically, earlier it used some generic API for the configuration management, but with the new latest release, so this is available with the IDSA 5.11, 5.12 M5, and have a dedicated API to manage these notification senders. Um, and she goes to some details on uh, things to consider you when you are using this particular uh, uh, API. So so the supertenants one it's still using the file based one. It's keeping that as it is, and like tenant wise you can define uh, different notification senders using these APIs, and like the things like permissions required, etc. When somebody external clients invoke in this particular API. So as mentioned, there are like different channels for this notification sending as email and SMS. So she go into the details on the what are the different attributes provide needed, and can be used in these particular requests, and go into those details, and similar for the SMS. uh, and uh, and she concluding the uh, article by providing these postman collection that comes handy, so that anybody can simply uh, try import this collection to the postman and give it a try with the latest items M5 release. Uh, so those are the some interesting development and blog posts around the from the team. And if we go to the main topic, like we have 3 sessions. We'll start with Yasin, like um explaining how Flutter, which is popular framework that being used for develop mobile applications, and how Identity Server can simply connected to Flutter application you develop with Flutter uh, to use the WSO2 server login. So, and Avarjana go into the session where you can uh, integrate Identity Server analytics capabilities to integrate with the ELK stack. So if you familiar with Identity Server, so it comes with our own analytics server, but you can point that events to some other analytic system that may you already use in the organization. So you don't need to maintain just another analytic system just for the identity server. Just you can use the ELK stack that you have already configured for your other applications in the organization and simply integrate with the existing one. So Arjun will go into the details on that, and uh, uh, that can be have like endless possibilities to like uh, yeah, adding different dashboards that integrated with different systems. And the finally Janit will explain on like Angular SDK that we is working on that will be simplify the uh, uh, applications developed with the Angular and like making the identity authentication done by the any developer who using the Angular. You the how Angular SDK can be used to easily integrate with the identity server and make it simply create Angular application without that worrying about the any identity related uh, expert knowledge when doing your application development. So there has been like so we have been discussed some of the other SDKs as well. If you be in touch with the identity server commit call, so if you there have been we have discussed like 3 more SDKs that has been uh, uh, developed with the identity server. So if you interested, you can go for the check for the August commit call as well. um, so with that, let's start with our first session done by the Asit or with the how to integrate Flutter apps with the identity server login. So over to you, Yasin.
Thank you, Darshana. So yeah, in the first session, we'll talk about how to integrate Flutter, how to integrate WSO2 Identity Server into your Flutter applications. Now, first of all, we'll start off with a brief introduction to Flutter. Now, Flutter is the Google's new UI toolkit created for developers to build beautiful cross-platform applications. Now, so in this article, we'll create a sample application and then integrate WSO2 Identity Server into as an authentication mechanism. So now, first things first. So we expect, so we assume that you have a working knowledge of Flutter to get started. So basically, you need to understand how the UI is winded and stuff. So however, even if you don't understand, so we developed our sample application in a way that you can understand the logic and the data layer is different. So yeah, so yeah. Now we will see what we are going to build. So these are some sample screenshots of our application. So let me spin up the Android sample first, so that you can see in live.
So yes, Yasin, are you sharing the screen now?
Wait. Oh, sorry. So
Yeah.
I'll start again. So, I'm sorry, guys. So yeah. So in this session, we'll see how you can integrate WSO2 Identity Server into your Flutter applications. Now, first of all, you need to make sure you have working knowledge of Flutter. And yeah, so this is the thing that we are going to build. So in here, these are some sample screenshots of our application, sample application. And yeah, so I'll spin up. Yeah, this is the Android sample. So basically, so yeah, this is the home page, and yeah, we'll continue. Yeah, so So I'll briefly introduce the packages that we're using for this application. So we are depending on Flutter App Auth. So it's a wrapper package for App Auth. So like basically it's a official plugin from OIDC. So yeah, Flutter App Auth is a wrapper plugin that uses App Auth underneath. So we will be utilizing that package as our intermediate logic layer. So, and then let's move on to the sample application creation. So now I recommend you that you should clone the sample application, or either you can integrate this sample code into your existing Flutter project as well. So basically, if you have a project, so you can integrate the logic into your application without depending on the UI. If you want to try it out with the sample code, then clone this repository and yeah, open it with the integrated development. So yeah, now I'll move on to the structure of the application in a bit. So first of all, now we are assuming that you have a WSO2 Identity Server pack already downloaded. If you don't have a pack downloaded, you can go and download a pack for free. So we are using 5.11 pack. So either you can configure the identity server locally or in a hosted environment. So yeah, so let's move on to the applications creation. First of all, you need to log into your management console and go to the service providers, and you need to add a service provider. You can give any name for your application, say sample application, and then register the application. So once registered, you need to configure OpenID Connect configurations. So since we are developing native applications, we need to ensure that allowed grant types are limited. So we'll enforce the application to use authorization code flow instead of less secure implicit or refresh tokens. So I will keep refresh token here. And we will enforce PKCE mandatory. So this is a feature offered in WSO2 Identity Server according to the spec. So it's good to have this enabled. So the client application will send a code challenge. So the authorization code flow code will never be intercepted by other applications. And you also need to make sure that you have to pick this allow authentication without the client secret, and you need to provide a callback URL. So this callback URL basically is the reverse domain of your application and the URI. So basically you can provide sample app Flutter and the login callback. And save it. Yeah. Now once saved, so as you can see, so we have a client secret and a client key. So we can copy this key. Now we have already downloaded the sample application. So we need to, so under our sample application, we have the data folder. Under data, we have constants. So what you can do is you can replace this ID token with your, client ID with your existing client ID. And then you can replace the server domain. So basically, if it's a hosted environment, you put the URL, and if it's a local environment, just put the local host. And you need to register the auth redirect URL as well. So whatever the thing that we have given here. So basically, we need to make sure exact thing is provided. And you don't need to alter the discovery endpoint or the origins or issuers. And so once that is done, so you need to make sure all of the configurations. So basically, we have some set of dependencies that we are depending on in the sample application. Now you need to first of all install it using a pub.get. So I'm assuming that you have Flutter installed in your environment. So just basically pub.get, and you will install the dependencies. And you need to make sure add these configurations. So as I said earlier, you can either use the sample application or integrate the logic into your existing application. So if it's an existing applications, what you need to do is add these configurations, the whole configurations into the relevant files. So if the sample application, what you need to do is replace these values. So basically under Android app level Gradle, you need to replace these values here. And same goes to this. So even in iOS, you need to set up the custom scheme like this. It's located in runner, and then info playlist. You need to replace the custom scheme here. And then, yeah. So if you're running this sample application, this change is already done for you. So you have to make sure that if you are integrating it to a local already existing application, you have to make sure that these dependency is met. So this is a required dependency to actually requirement to in order to run the application. Now also, if you are running Android X, so there's another configuration. So in our sample application, we have Android X already configured. So these additional configurations are added for you. If you are integrating it to another project, you might have to go and add these configurations into your manifest Excel. Yeah, once we have done this. So now let's run the application and see. So we'll run the iOS sample. So while that is compiling, I'll briefly explain about the package structure. So in our sample application, we have a decoupled structure. So we have block package, and we have the data package and the UI package. So the block and the data is decoupled from the UI. So even if you have another project that you want to add the logic, so you just have to copy and paste the files under this and add the relevant configurations. So there are no UI dependencies on this. And yeah, so now we can start it. Yeah, this is the home page of the application, and this is the ID token. So we are decoding the ID token, and this is the decoded ID token, and the access token, and the refresh token. We are also additionally fetching the user info endpoint in auth. So these are the additional properties that we have got. So the profile picture and the email display name. So let's quickly run down the source code. So we have already explored the constants and the models. So the first, let's go to the models. So so we have two functions in the service layer. So we have login and the logout. So in the login, first of all, as I said earlier, we are relying on the Flutter app auth library. We are creating a token request with the relevant configurations and the scopes. So we are passing OpenID profile and offline access to get the refresh token. And also, yeah, now we are actually initiating the call using this convenient method. So Flutter app auth actually provides three methods. So one is authorize and the other one is token. So instead of calling these functions individually, this function is a convenient function that you can pass these configurations. It will handle the PKC code generation and exchanging the code to a token and all those stuff in one call. So once we get the result, so we are using a Flutter secure storage. So in secure storage, we use in iOS, we use the keychain, and Android, we use the key store. So we use this key store and key secure storage to actually store these tokens securely. And simultaneously, we are calling the get use info. So use endpoint as well, use info endpoint. So with the use endpoint, we are calling the origin and the auth to use info. And we will get whatever the claims that we have configured initially for the service provider. And we will attach those into the user model. So this is a convenient model that we have passed. So ideally, you don't have to bind these into the model. So only the user info part is what we need. But for the demonstration purposes, we have added it. So yeah, that covers the models and the services. So we have utility functions. So basically that's, and yeah. So let's talk about how the logic is binded to the UI as a quick explanation. So we have these two functions. Now, if you check the usages of this function, it is actually referring to the block. So basically, block is a state management pattern in Flutter. So as I said earlier, you can actually copy and paste this logic into your application if you're using block. Otherwise, you can just copy the service functions and then integrate it to your existing application. Yeah, so this is the point. And if you have any questions, you can ask, and also make sure you go through this article and refer. So there are some tips we have mentioned. So we will be continuously updating this article when we, with new features and techniques. And yeah, do you guys have any questions?
So we can move to the next one. And if we get any questions, we'll answer along the way.
All right. Okay, Avarjuna, over to you.
Yep. Thank you, Yasin. So I will be talking about the ELK integration for the WSO2 IS. So let me go through our README file so that I can give you a brief understanding on what we are doing and what this means to the identity server. So let me introduce you to the ELK if you are not already familiar with that. So in this, we have like three components. basically, but we actually have 4 components. So in this one, we have Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And apart from that, they have a new addition, beats. So we are using file beats to configure our bridge, but the basic 3 components are these. Um, so the Elasticsearch acts like the database to the ELK stack, and the Logstash, its duty is simply reading the logs and transforming it and then sending it to the Elasticsearch. And then Kibana is the visualization component where we can create components or dashboards and then visualize. So apart from these 3, we have file beats. Actually, it's beats, and we are using the file beat component. So in this one, we can read from our log output and then convert the input, then translate to the Logstash, as you can see in this diagram. So we have 2 integrations basically. So in this path, we are using logger, filebeat, and then into the Logstash. Otherwise, we can use the HTTP publisher, then directly into the Logstash, then into the Elasticsearch, and then Kibana. So we have created some custom Elastic APIs for custom dashboards. I will be demonstrating that as well. So that's the basic project architecture we are going to talk about. So let me get through to the setting up the Elastic Stack. So for this one, we need Java. Um, so Java installation is pretty straightforward. In this documentation, I have included Ubuntu and macOS instructions to install Logstash, Elasticsearch, Kibana, and FileBeats. So you can refer to their official repository so that you can get up-to-date information, because this one might might not get updated. So in this one, we have 7.10. At the time of development, we had 7.8, and now they have 7.10. So you can follow these documentations for the most updated ones. So if you're using Windows, you can use the zip archive. Otherwise, you can use the dip packages, or in the macOS case, you can just install using Brew. Okay, so when we talk about these configurations, first we have to go through how to publish these events from the WSO2 Identity Server. Then we move on to how to receive those outputs and then process them to a JSON format where the Elasticsearch can utilize those inputs and then index them into uh, 2 indices, and then the Kibana can consume those indices via APIs so that it can display the output. So let's get to Logstash configurations. Sorry, first let me introduce you to how to configure the WSO2 IS to publish the events. So in our repo, we have WSO2 IS configs. In this deployment YAML, so these lines enable the login and session data publishers. So we are using these 2 publishers to publish our events to the Logstash. So in your case, so you have to, if you have a fresh pack, then you can add these lines to publish the events. And then we have to configure the event publishers. So we have included for both HTTP and Logger. In this demo, I will continue with HTTP one. So we have 2 event publisher configurations. So this one is for authentication data, and there's another one for session data. So in this one, um, I changed the event adapter type as HTTP and the event type to JSON. So in the default IS pack, these will be different. So you have to change these um, types. And then we are publishing to HTTP URL localhost 1 in the port 8084. So If you are installing Logstash in default, you will get this as 8080 only. So in my case, I had to change it to 884. So you can choose the port of your preference by editing the Logstash configuration. So you can refer to documentation for that one. And in this one, we have a special property to identify the event type as auth for this one. And when we move to the session, those same configurations apply, but the event type will be different. So it will be identified as session event type. So the reason behind that is we are using two different indices for authentication data and session data. Uh, the reason behind that is we have two different default dashboards provided with our configurations for authentication data and session data. So you can omit one if you want. That's up to the user. And after we replace our deployment to UML and the event publishers in here with the event publishers provided in the repo. Then we can run the WSO2 server. So I did already run that one. And the event publishing part will be completed so that we have completed the identity server part and the HTTP part. So we will move on to Logstash. Okay, so we have three different Logstash configurations when we use the file bit, when we use the HTTP one, when we use the direct logger one. So I will be going through the code of the HTTP one now. So basically what it does is it has input, component and filter, and then the output. So in the input one, we are getting an HTTP input here. So if you look at the Logstash logger configuration, it's a file configuration. So we are reading from a direct file. So in this one, the difference is the HTTP input. So the default port is 880 as I mentioned earlier. So we are using the 884. And we have few different filters. So I will go through each one. So in this one, we have geo IP filter. So this will filter out the event payload data remote IP. So we have the user's remote IP address, then we will turn that into geo IP object. So geolocation object. So it will contain the country and the city of the residence for that IP address. So we can visualize that in a map. I will show that in a little bit. And then we have the user agent filter. So we are using the user's browser agent so that we can decode information about the operating system and the browser of the user. And then we have a small Ruby code component. This is used to convert the comma separated user roles into an array. That's pretty straightforward code component. So we are just converting the event payload data roles comma separated into an array. That's for indexing purposes. And if you want to populate data and test before the deployment, then you can use this component. You can add some timestamps. So as a custom parameter, if you're trying it with Postman, this part must be removed if you are going to deploy. And then the output part. Um, as I mentioned earlier, we have a headers event type. We are using this event type to separate the Elasticsearch indices. So if the event type is auth, then we are indexing that in the auth index. Otherwise, if it's the session, then we index it in the session index. The same configurations are applied in the logger publishers as well. So in this, we have few different filters. We are using grok filters to identify the event data because it's reading from a file, not a straightforward JSON. So we have to convert those using the grok filters. You can study more about grok filters in the documentation from the Logstash. That's a kind of broad section, which I'm not going to explain in this one. In this one, the output is a little bit different. Since we are reading from a file, we don't have a header. So in this case, we are using the unique ID feature of the event publisher. So let me show that. What I'm saying is, in the event publishers, as I mentioned earlier, we have logo publishers as well. So in this one, you can see we are publishing via the event adapter type as logger, not HTTP, and we have unique ID named auth. For the session one, you can see we are sending the unique ID as session. So that is the indicator to use when we are filtering out the logger event adapter. So it's straightly event type, then auth. So this event type is decoded from our group filter as well. And then the same rule applies. If it's auth, then index as auth, then otherwise index as session. Okay, that's the logstash configuration. Let's move on to the Kibana visualizations and what Elasticsearch does. So these are two dashboards made from the Kibana. In our repo, you can find Kibana configurations as well as exports. So these exports will help you to get up and running with our default dashboards provided by us. So this is the default dashboard which I imported. So if you go to uh, stack management and then saved objects from the Kibana, there you can import a NDJSON file. So that NDJSON file is provided here. Uh, please keep in mind that the 7.8 and 7.10 has a different in identifying the time patterns. So you have to import the relevant version. Okay. So let me go through some of the components in the auth dashboard. We have, first of all, filters, filter by service provider, identity provider, tenant, and user store domain. These filters are global filters, which will apply to all these components. And if you want to write a custom query using KQL, that's Kibana query language, that's fairly easy to use. So you can do it here. And you have time filters here, where you can filter out the time duration where you want to see the results. In this section, we have total logins count, where success, failed, and first login counts. And then we have the login success wheel, where you can get a visual understanding on how many failed logins are there at a given time range. And then the login success over time. So if we take a time duration, we can see if there's any unusual login fails at any given time. For example, like if we have a red spike somewhere over 12 o'clock, that means there's a issue in that part. So we can examine it and then find a solution there. And then login spec of 5 roles. So this will be limited to 5 results. And then the login spec of 5 identity providers as well as service providers. So you can understand if there's a problem with one service provider, like if we have like multiple failure logins or many failure logins there. So you can easily understand those patterns by using that one. This is the map where we're using the GeoIP filter. In this one, we will show as clusters where the users try to log in. And there's a data dump where you can further inquiry about your data in this one. So these are the major parameters in the payload. If you want to examine it further, you can go to discover and examine the raw result. So these are the events which received as JSON input. So you can view it as JSON or just as a table. So you can like debug here what are the missing parts, like if there's a abnormal behavior somewhere. Likewise, you can examine all the events here. Same goes to the session dashboard. Same filters are there. And then we have the active session count over time chart. It will show how many active session counts at that time. And then the top 5 longest sessions by users. So this is a calculated field using the painless scripting language. I will show you the code in a minute. So we can see what is the duration, or the duration categorized as less than 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 24 hours, likewise. And then the average session duration by the user. So this user has an average session duration of 186 seconds, likewise. And then here we use the user agent filter. We are showing how many sessions are initiated by this web browser and how many sessions are initiated by this OS. Likewise, we get a pie chart for each different OS and web browser. And then there's a dump as well here as well. Then same goes here. You can go to discover and check what are the data available in this one. So I'm repeatedly showing this one because you have to get a proper understanding on what data we have here, like in the JSON object, what data we have here to create your own custom dashboard components. Yes, so if you want to create a custom component, you can go to visualize and go to create visualization. You have plenty of choices here. So you can select whatever you want, and then you have to choose a source. So this is why we have two separate indices. So you can actually create uh, for both the auth and session indexes. So if you're going with auth, then this adding these parameters and filters might get some time to use too, but it's really easy if you follow the documentation properly. And then let me just add something. So let's save this visualization as demo 1, assuming that we did all these queries and filters. And then we can go to our dashboard. Let's go to session auth dashboard, where we use the auth index, and we can go to edit. And then here you can see we can add components. So in here, you can search demo 1, then click on that one. It's added. So you can go, and if you want to, you can rearrange this and the resize. That's up to you. So if you don't want some component, you can go ahead and delete these components. So if you feel like this chart is useless to you, then you can edit the default one. In case anything goes wrong, you already have the NTJSON file, so you can import it again. Okay, so that's the Kibana dashboard. And as promised, I will show you my code for that calculated field. So in this one, I'm calculating the time elapsed for the session. So this is written in painless scripting language. So this is pretty much similar to Java, but they have like loosely typed variables. It's really easy to get used to. So this is how I calculate the time elapsed for a session and the overall duration for a session. So you can tweak those codes if you want, or add scripted fields. So That's the beauty of the ELK stack. So you can create any number of fields, remove. If you don't want to index something, just remove it. Likewise, all the customization features are there. You just have to do it. Okay, then let's move on to security. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a Postman collection for Elasticsearch. It's already included here. So you can just import it. So all the requests related to our default components are there. So you can examine those filters and what are the queries we are using here. So you can just send and receive the result. So in the sense of security, you can secure these endpoints for to prevent like unauthorized access or data being stolen or modified. So you can follow this doc and enable those secure measures. In this one also, when we send data via HTTP, in this one, you can enable SSL rather than send into HTTP one. So you can enable SSL from the Logstash endpoint as well as then you can add these properties using the by referring to the WSO2 IS docs. And finally, let me go through some performance testing we have done. So in this one, we can see that if we are not using any event adapters, we have a throughput of 182.33 requests per second. And when we have the HTTP publisher, we get 176.37 throughput. So in this one, in this diagram, you can see that there's a no like visible or huge performance drop by using this integration. So that's a huge win since we have like such a rich features with all these configurations and all this customization without the performance loss. So that's the beauty of this one. And then if you're willing to move to AWS, you can refer my blog post on how to set up a ELK stack on AWS EC2 instance and open up the endpoints to connect to our WSO2 IS instance. So that's it for my my session. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask now.
Yeah, so since we are running out of time, so let's move on to the next session and get any questions along the time.
Sure. Over to you, Janit.
Thank you, Arjuna. Uh, so today we will be talking about the newest addition to our SDK family, the Angular SDK. So before talking about the Angular SDK itself, I would like to talk about what Angular is. So as some of you may already know, Angular is a TypeScript-based web application framework. So web development framework initiated by Google, and it has a huge open source community around. So our SDK will be useful to those millions of users around the world who uses Angular to develop their web application in order to provide secure authentication. So without going into further details, let me quickly go to our SDK repository. So this is our SDK repository. So talking about the structure of our SDK repository, we have all the source code necessary to our package inside the lib folder, and we have all the samples stored in our samples folder. So you can clone our repository and contribute to our. And also, uh, let me quickly go through the README file of our SDK. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, so our Angular Authentication SDK can be used by the developers to add secure authentication to their applications. So we use OIDC and Overflow in order to achieve this. So, and this SDK is currently built on top of the JavaScript, existing JavaScript SDK we have previously. So, the difference we mainly focused on is the Angular router. So, Angular router is the built-in navigation, in-app navigation provided by the Angular itself. So many Angular developers prefer using Angular router. So we have integrated our SDK with Angular router in order to provide the necessary navigations. But you can use our SDK without the router as well. So this is our package information. We have currently a minor release. So we are we have released a 0.1 version. You can try it out with this name, SW or Angular. So without before going to trying our sample applications, so I would like to give a brief introduction about what our SDKs uh, structure is. So what is the structure of our SDK? So we have the Asgardio auth module as the top level Angular module. So this will be the top level Angular module. Under that, we have several components and services. So the users can use those services and components to their application. So these three services and components we currently provide. So Asgardio Auth service. So Asgardio Auth service is a service containing a wide range of authentication functions. So we have many authentication functions in the Asgardio Auth service, and we also have the route guard, which is called the Asgardio Auth guard. So a route guard is used to protect app pages from unauthorized access. And we also have another component called sign in redirect component. This handles the authentication flow and redirects the user back. So let's see how to integrate our SDK to your Angular application. I will be using one of the samples. So I'll be using that. So we have two samples currently. So I will be using one sample to explain how to integrate the SDK into the an Angular application. So as I mentioned earlier, you can install our application inside your existing Angular app, and then you have to add Asgardio auth module to the imports array of app module TS. So we have the app module TS file, and you have to add this Asgardio auth module as an import, and you have to provide the configuration object inside the forward function. So Asgardio auth modules forward inside the forward function, you have to provide the configs. So let's see what are the available configs. So these are the available configs right now. So we have sign in redirect, URL, client ID, and server key. So these three are mandatory. So you need to provide these three parameters. So the first one is the redirect URL when a user sign in. And the second one is the client ID. Client ID is the OAuth client key. So I will show you how to get the client ID in a minute. And also we have server origin. So this is the origin of your identity provider. So as we mentioned earlier, you can have any identity provider as you like, but we prefer to have WSO2 Identity Server, which is a great product to provide secure authentication and identity server related services. So I'll be demonstrating my sample application using that as well. So again, we have to import the SCIM auth service. SCIM auth service is containing all the necessary authentication functions we have provided. So let's see what are the functions right we have. So as I mentioned earlier, SCIM auth services uh, contain wide range of authentication functions. So the main ones are sign in and the sign in redirect function. So sign in you just initiate the authentication flow, but in, if you sign in with redirect, the user will be redirected back uh, to the same uh, place where they left. So in order to add the sign in with redirect, you have to add the sign in redirect component to the separate part. So you have to use Angular router, and you have to add a separate path, separate route to the SCIM sign in redirect component. So as you can see in this application, we have used SCIM sign in redirect component, and we have assigned it to a separate route. So again, we have to use the sign in redirect URL as the same as the registered route. So then we can call the sign in with redirect function. This will be redirect the user back, and you can also use your own custom flow, redirect flow, using this sign in function as well. Apart from that, we have the sign out function, which you logs out the user. So you can call the sign out function and log out the user. And we have a couple of functions to get the access token, ID tokens, service endpoint, and basic user information. So you can read what are those and what are the return variables in this our README SDK. Also, we have the auth guard. So as I mentioned earlier, auth guard is the used to protect our routes from unauthorized access. So in order to have the route guard, you need to add the can activate uh, interface inside the route. So I have added a can activate here to the profile component. So I think that's the current update on our SDK. So you can use the SCIM auth service and to provide wide range of authentication functions, and you can use auth guard to protect the routes. So without further ado, let's uh, uh, try out our sample application. So currently we have two sample applications, one with the Angular router, one without the Angular router. So I will be demonstrating my the usage of our SDK using this basic Angular sample. This one does not use the Angular uh, router. So I have already downloaded this application. So let me go inside it, and you have to call the npm install to install all the dependencies, and npm start to serve the application. So it will use the ng-serve command here. So I have already started served my application. So you can ng-serve command, and this will uh, uh, the developer server will be open in a localhost 5000 point. So then uh, so I will be using WSO2 Identity Server to demonstrate how to add the application. So I will be using the latest console application. So I have to log in to the WSO2 Identity Server, and I can create a new application. So my friend used the management console, so I will be using the updated console app provided by WSO2 Identity Server. So inside the new application, you have to create a single page application, and you have to provide a name, and you have to add the redirect URLs or the callback URLs mentioned here. So you will be adding to all the callback URLs mentioned in the sample. So let me add the callback URL here, and you can register your application. So now we have created an application, sample app, and we can now go to the access tab and get the client ID. So this one was one I mentioned earlier. So you need to copy this and paste it inside the config file. So the config file is inside the src folder. So inside source folder you can find the config.json. So without providing the client ID, you will be prompted to provide the client ID variable here. I'll be providing the client ID, and when saved, you will see the sample lab. So also you need to add localhost 5000 to the allowed origin. So the WSO2 Identity Server will not accept uh, uh, calls coming from the URLs other than mentioned here. So you need to add that as well. So you can update here. Now you can log in. So when you log in, so I already logged in straight away because WSO2 Identity Server uses the authentication. So I have already logged in. So when you log in, so we can find what are the authentication response, and the ID token will be displayed here. So these two will be using our Angular SDKs built-in function. So the get user info function and the get decoded ID token function. So I will be using those here. So and you can see the identity token and the what is the response for the get user info. So you can then log out after finishing, and you can log in if you want again. And so you can see this. Okay. So you can try out our SDK to get your Angular application for the secure authentication. So I think that's it for my end. Darshan, over to you.
Yeah. So thanks Yasin, Varchan and Janit for conducting today's session. So with that, we can conclude our session. So our next comment call will be planned on the last week of the February. So keep in touch on the Twitter Slack channels on the updates on that. Okay. So thanks.